Everybody, welcome to the webinar, WAPOR webinar about mixed mode in survey research. This is our last webinar for this season. We will have three presenters, Tobias Gomer, Oliviero, Marchese, and Trevor Thompson. So we will start right now with Tobias Gomer. Wait a minute. I'm going to share my screen. So Tobias is a senior researcher and team leader at GESIS. His methodological research interests include survey design, data quality, non-response, prevention and correction methods for biases, and analysis of social and individual change. And he will speak about the European value study where self-administered mixed mode design was used, and particularly of the German situation. So Tobias, your turn. I'm going to stop sharing and you go. Oh, please, everybody, just a word to say that we will have the three presenters in a row and you will be able to ask questions afterwards. Please do not use the Q&A. Use the chat for your questions so that everything will be at the same place. Thanks. Tobias.
All right. Thank you very much, Claire. Thanks for having me. Yeah, as Claire already announced, I'm going to speak a bit about the European value study, or at least the German data collection part of that, and our experiences we had with doing that survey in self-administered mixed mode design. So you might ask, why self-administered mixed mode? Well, when we look at face-to-face surveys, a lot of you will have seen similar figures like that one, where response rates are on the decline since some time now. And my graph ends in 2012, but I put the number for the German General Social Survey here. So in Germany, we are facing response rates in large-scale face-to-face surveys of around about 30%. So if you would do a survey like that right now, if there were no COVID-19 pandemic, you would expect a response rate of 30 or less. That's the issue, right? Or might be an issue. And also we see further development that's increasing survey costs in face-to-face surveys. So what you see here is we plotted the consumer prices. That's the grayish line, and we plotted costs for running a survey, face-to-face survey. So the German General Social Survey again, the dashed line, and the solid line is the European Social Survey in Germany. And you see these costs are increasing way more than the average consumer prices are increasing. So it's getting increasingly expensive to do face-to-face surveying in Germany, at least, and I guess in other countries it will be similar. So this is why we decided to test self-administered mixed mode surveys as part of the European value study. And how did we do it? What did we do? Well, the European value study, I guess many of you will know this study. It's a large cross-national survey program that fields face-to-face surveys based on probability-based samples and the like. And well, the EVS methodology group, they decided to allow participating countries to test the use of self-administered mixed modes, mail and web mode, if they also did a face-to-face survey. So this was a complementary sample done as self-administered mixed modes. And also the group required us to use a probability-based sample to do the self-administered mixed mode surveys. And in the end, 6 countries of the EVS participated. So Denmark, Finland, Germany, Iceland, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. And if you're interested in what they did, there is a nice publication by Laux et al. That details what each country did, how each country did it and why, and what the results are, and how all this data was combined in the end for the EVS data release. So I recommend, if you're interested in that, to check it out. So today I'm just going to talk about the German experiences, because that's what we did and that's what I can actually talk about. So the EVS Germany, we of course tried to compare the face-to-face survey we did as part of the EVS with the self-administered mixed mode survey we did. And we also tried out, experimented with a couple of different ways of designing a self-administered mixed mode survey. So we tried different incentive strategies. We tried different mode choice sequences, and we tried different survey lengths. So our design basically was we drew one huge probability-based sample from German municipalities registers, and we had this huge cross sample. Then we used that cross sample to randomly select one part of the sample that we used for our face-to-face survey. So this was the full EVS questionnaire, taking roughly 60 minutes to complete. We used another slice of this huge cross sample to administer a self-administered mixed mode survey using a matrix questionnaire design. So this basically, to simplify it, it's a shortened version of the questionnaire, roughly taking 40 minutes to complete. And the last slice of our cross sample we used to administer, again, a self-administered mixed mode survey with the full length EVS questionnaire that takes roughly, again, 60 minutes to complete. So this is the same questionnaire that we used in the face-to-face survey. And in this matrix design condition, I would call it, or group, so the one with the shorter questionnaire, there we did most of our experiments. So this design, it's rather complex, and I'll just briefly tell you what's important here. So we had several groups of respondents that received different ways of mode choice sequences. So we had a sequential mode choice sequence, and we had a simultaneous mode choice sequence. In the sequential mode choice sequence, we contacted the respondents 3 times, and we offered them a web link to participate with the first contact, the second contact, and the third contact. And we offered them a printed questionnaire to participate in the mail mode only with the third contact. In contrast, in the simultaneous group, we offered them a paper-based questionnaire already with the first contact. So that's the difference here. And we also varied the incentives. So one group received a prepaid incentive, the other group received a postpaid incentive. And this is what we did here. It got a bit more complex because we implemented these experiments just in part of the sample, and then we had a responsive design, but I'm not going into this. Here it's simply not enough time, but if you're interested, just shoot me a mail, and I can send you manuscripts and stuff like that. All right, so based on this rather complex design, we did a lot of analyses, and I just picked a few, and I also provide references if you're intrigued and want to look into that and get all the details. So the first thing I selected for this talk is the fieldwork period. The solid line is the response rate for our face-to-face survey, plotted over weeks. And as you can see, it took us quite a couple of weeks to complete our face-to-face survey, right? Nearly half a year. And in comparison, the mixed mode surveys, we were able to wrap up data collection very quickly, depending on how many contacts we tried out. In one condition, we even tried 4 times contacting the respondent, and this obviously prolonged the fieldwork period. But basically, we would be able to do such a survey, a self-administered mixed mode survey, in roughly, well, 8 weeks. So this is a huge improvement compared to the long fieldwork period for our face-to-face survey here. Looking at response rates, because I think a lot of you will be interested in response rates. The face-to-face survey yielded a very German response rate of roughly 28%. So that's what you would expect in Germany right now. And our different conditions we had here for the self-administered mixed mode surveys, well, they yielded in 2 out of 5 times a lower response rate, and in 3 out of 5 times a higher response rate, actually a much higher response rate. That the top group had like 39.4% response rate. So when using a €5 prepaid incentive and a simultaneous or concurrent mode choice sequence. So this was a interesting finding for us. So judging from the response rate, it seems to have worked to provide our survey in self-administered mixed mode. Another very interesting finding we had here is the share of web respondents corresponding to the share of mail respondents, of course. So we saw that that's the red box. If you offer respondents in Germany, at least the mail, the possibility to participate in the mail mode already with the first contact, they will do that. So we had around about 80% of our sample used paper-based questionnaires if offered with the first contact. In comparison, in our sequential mode choice sequence, so the green box, half of the sample used paper-based questionnaires if offered only with the third contact. And this was a rather interesting finding for us. So if mail is offered, it will be used in Germany. And then coming to cost, another point that you might be very interested in. So the reference here is the cost for 3,000 interviews in face-to-face mode. And we calculated the total cost for collecting 3,000 interviews in the different ways of fielding our self-administered mixed mode survey. And what we see here is it's cheaper than face-to-face, as we all would expect, but it's not like ridiculously cheap. It's well, 40% of the cost. And what we also see is there is quite some variation between the different ways of fielding a self-administered mixed mode survey. Just like the response rates, there is not just one way of designing the survey, and it will have impacts on the costs and also on the response rate, of course. All right, if we go to what we actually capture with these data collection efforts, we run an analysis where we took 132 rating scales from the EVS, rescaled them to between 0 and 1, and plotted the means of these variables in this graph. So on the X, you see on the left hand side, you see the means of the variables for a mixed mode survey with the full questionnaire, and use on the Y, you have the means for the face-to-face survey. And if they are on the diagonal, they are the same for respondents. So, and what you can see there, there's not much going on in differences, right? So we measure basically the same if we use face-to-face or self-administered mixed mode, and I think that's a very good sign, actually. So it seems that we can use these well, new kinds of designs to measure our variables of interest. All right, I think I'm quite okay-ish in time. So to come to my conclusion, what did we learn for Germany? Well, a very interesting lesson we learned is that we are able to collect our data more rapidly with self-administered modes compared to the face-to-face mode. So we had like this half year versus 8 weeks. So this is a huge thing. Also, we found that cost savings are possible, but they might be lower as you would expect if you want to do a self-administered mixed mode with the same standards regarding sample and so on compared to a face-to-face survey. And we also found that the costs might strongly vary between the different designs or ways of designing a self-administered mixed mode. And also there are hidden costs that one should acknowledge. For example, if you have a survey like the EVS that's been running since years, and you want to transit, so there will be hidden cost, mostly regarding staff, right? So someone has to plan that. Someone has to change the questionnaire a bit to make it feasible for self-administered mixed mode and so on. And that needs to be considered. It's more than just the costs a Fieldwork Institute will bring you. And finally, that's a huge thing for us, at least. The mail mode will be used if offered, at least in Germany. And this will have additional implications for costs, because one of the main driving factors we found in our surveys was all this cost for printing the letters, sending incentives, sending questionnaires, and so on. So that's a huge thing here to consider. And also regarding questionnaire design, so routing. So if you have a lot of questions like that, that will increase work and will be a thing you might want to consider if you offer mail mode. All right, I think that's it, right? Here are some references if you're interested in what I just talked about and you want to dive into some more details. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tobias, for this presentation. We will now go to Oliviero Marchese. Wait a minute, I'm gonna share my screen and show my slide. Oliviero is a Global Director of Election Research at Ipsos. He has 30 years of experience in research methods, focusing on data collection, statistical analysis, and data modeling, especially in election research. Since 1995, he successively acted as Managing Director of the French operations in Paris, President of Ipsos Interactive Services in Europe, and Head of Global Access and Engagement. He was appointed in his current public affairs role in 2018. So now I will let Oliviero start his presentation.
Thank you very much, Claire. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to present what I think about the multi-mixed mode, let's say. I will shortly present how the political polling is organized in Ipsos. And this is because I think that is relevant for our discussion let's say, because it is organized more as a continuous process and not just an event-driven activity. Then I will talk about a mixed mode as more than a plan B, because we frequently, and in particular in this last year, we had to move to, for example, move away from face-to-face in many countries. And sometimes we had, the solution was not just to go from face-to-face to CATI or from CATI to online, but also to mix some of the mode. And we produced some also information about this and some case studies. Then I will focus on mixed mode, on how to improve mixed mode, how to use mixed mode to improve sample coverage, and how to use mixed mode to mitigate survey error. I have just a short note here. This presentation is essentially about mixed mode as a parallel use, not as a sequential use. That is really extremely important, because that is that is the let's say, in a way, in general, in the public, in election research, things goes too fast to have a kind of sequential mode. Of course, mixed mode is frequently seen as a confounding factor. So I'm adopting here a different point of view, which is of course, having different mode in parallel can be a confounding factor. You can look at the bottle as half, let's say, half empty, but you can also try to look at the bottle as half full, saying how to leverage mixed mode to improve sample coverage and measurement error. I will then end on some consideration on weighting, of course, and then let's say conclusive consideration on art and science of polling, some more personal consideration possibly. So the political polling at Ipsos. At Ipsos, we think that, of course, election polling is a very important activity because it is part of the electoral process. So it brings relevant information to on what is happening in the election campaign to the public. Well done is good for democracy, well done and well communicated, but of course it's a big responsibility. For this and for several reasons, it's becoming harder to do accurate polls. Political environment is more volatile, which makes it harder to capture rapid changes that happen during the electoral campaigns. And this is also because of this volatility and because it goes faster and faster. It's one of the reasons why, for example, it's more and more difficult to handle face-to-face polling. Of course, even with the best method, and this is always, there is always a level of uncertainty. Nonetheless, we always strive to conduct our polling with the maximum level of rigor and based on our global expertise, which is why at Ipsos, this is not exclusively a local activity. What does it mean? The global expertise is not that one guy knows centrally everything about election. Absolutely not. But the point is much more about circulating the information and circulating the learnings we have from an election to another, from a country to another. So this is what we really believe it's important. So we at Ipsos, we look at political polling as a continuous process, as opposed to being an event-driven activity. So with the aim of building the knowledge and expertise across the company. Again, so this is something we really, it's very important to us because again, usually the public opinion is a kind of local stars business. So with people that are very well known, they perfectly know their country, and they have a very deep understanding of their country. At the same level, usually they don't look too much at other countries and other experiences. And we think in Ipsos that by looking and comparing and circulating the learnings, we can really improve our practices. So I just mentioned here the mixed mode that Ipsos better than at plan B is just the title of also of a brochure that we have released, and you can have a look. There are a lot of cases, case study, which can be extremely important. One point which is important to me is that we always look at the data collection methods in a kind of mode agnostic approach. Why? Because at Ipsos we do manage all kind of data collection mode. Of course, from face-to-face, telephone, online, every mail survey, and so on. So for us, when we choose a data collection mode or a combination of data collection mode, it is a way for us, it depends on the design of the study and not just because a specific data collection mode is available in the company. In pre-election polling, mixed mode initially tried to deal with coverage error, as different profiles of voters had the tendency to respond to different data collection methods. That also proved useful at mitigating measurement errors, like interviewer effect, related effects. Nevertheless, such benefits must be evaluated in each country, taking in consideration the specific geography, technological environment, cultural and political circumstances. Again, the global expertise is not a global rule that imposed to everybody, is exactly the opposite, is a centralized organization of to centralize the way we circulate the information and the learnings. I think that proactive use of mixed mode can help research to address necessary trade-off in the context of providing the highest quality while focusing against the research project main priorities as representativeness, measurement validity, consistency, speed, and cost. So here I just to give the idea, I draw what I call a cell-centered, a cell-oriented sample design. You have here the rows and columns of each of the matrix of each of the tables are let's say the criteria of stratification. Here I taken a case. Some of you could possibly have a think at, for example, some polling in Latin America, for example, where the gender age criteria is very important, but of course it's what is also extremely important is the social grade. And you know, for example, that in face-to-face, some categories, like the young people, are extremely difficult to reach. And also some higher grade, sorry, the A grade, are sometimes difficult to reach. And when you can, where the face-to-face, for example, is extremely useful is for the lower grade, lower social grade, and what we usually call D and E. You can have a different set, let's say, different kind of coverage for the telephone survey, where the younger people are still difficult to reach frequently, and on the opposite of the face-to-face, the lower social grade are more difficult to reach. And then you have, let's say, the central cells that are where the telephone does a very good job. I also put the online where, for example, we know that for the lower social grades or for the elderly people, the coverage is not so good, but it can help, for example, with the issue you usually have in face-to-face and telephone on the younger people. So the idea is to leverage different mode, data collection mode, to bring a better coverage to the overall sample. Of course, even if a cell-oriented sample design can correctly cover all the sample cells, different data collection mode can bring different respondent profile for the same set of sample cells. So mixed mode in a way can compensate uncontrolled difference in the respondent profile by sourcing the sample cells in a more balanced way. What I mean by that, I mean that you always need some level of overlap. So in this example, in a way, the contribution of each data collection mode are exclusive. Of course, in real life, they should not be. Now, another draw, a different draw, to illustrate what I mean by mitigating measurement error through the mixed mode. Of course, measurement error, just as a reminder, measurement error occurs when a respondent's answer to a question is inaccurate. That is, it departs from the true value. It can vary across modes depending on whether the survey is conducted by an interviewer or when it is self-administered. Interviewer-administered surveys can offer respondents less privacy and anonymity, generating some acquiescence or social desirability. Both effects can severely impact the election polling, affecting questions related to turnout, possible recall, and voting intention. The way a respondent provides the answer, spoken, written, or typed, can also affect the response. So including the amount of time given to the response, the level of thought involved, and the amount of detail provided. Experience can help understanding the measurement bias, although a preliminary analysis of the political market is needed. Just one quick example here. For example, in less consolidated democracies, sometimes the face-to-face can, or anyway, an interviewer-administered poll questionnaire can push the respondent to be cautious and give more pro-governmental, let's say, more pro-government answers. So it means that, again, some level of modeling here can help. As you have seen here, I put blue for the interviewers administered interviewing, and yellow for self-administered. Yellow plus blue is green. At least this is the ambition, the idea there is behind putting together different data collection modes in order to mitigate the measurement error. Again, I don't deny the difficulties related to this task, but this is the ambition, and this is why we try to do. Of course, in the polling, we do, in the election polling, we do have an advantage in a way. Of course, it's also a big risk, as you all know, but it's also an advantage that we can compare with the real results, with the actual results. So in a way, we can have an analysis of the bias in terms of coverage on one side and in terms of interviewer-administered versus self-administered. We can find, for example, that for some parties that are more, for which it's more difficult to say I'm voting, let's say, for example, for a far-right party in a country where the far-right is not seen as a good choice, you could get a better measurement through self-administered than through interviewer-administered. So again, this is the idea of this mitigating measurement error. Of course, as you know, usually, if you think at the classical scheme of Robert Gross in the survey methodology book, it tends to classically you have two lines. One is about measurement on one side and representation on the other side. Unfortunately, in real life, this is not exactly what happens, because of course, representation and measurement issues are intertwined. So representation, as already mentioned, different data collection can bring different respondent profiles for the same set of sample cells. So each set of sample cells can also differ because of acquiescence or social desirability effect. So comparing results for a set of cells can help to appreciate and possibly mitigate the mode effects. What about weighting? One reminder, weighting should never be used to correct measurement error, which occurs when the respondent answer is inaccurate. That is specifically relevant for some social demographic variables, like, for example, education, which is frequently over-declared, and even more for the past vote recall when it is used in weighting schemes. So don't think about weighting as a mean to correct a measurement error. Only coverage error can be mitigated by appropriate weighting. So in a cell-oriented sample design, weighting is needed to piece together the sample puzzle. And again, the design is the key word here, a puzzle, not a patchwork, which is a fabric made of disparate pieces sewn together. That is all about piecing together the multiplicity of elements that sample design must assemble to reconstitute the reality of target population. I think that weighting is the appropriate tool and must reflect the underlying reasoning of the cell-oriented sample design. Of course, specific attention needs to be dedicated to interactions, especially for the ones which are not directly controlled through the sample design. One last word on the mixed mode. Surveys require a greater level of in-house expertise. Researchers need to fully understand the strengths and limitations of the modes they combine. Of course, statistical theory helps us to measure and reduce sampling error, but real life is more complex and means that we need to gauge the importance of what is more difficult to measure. So the art of the pollster survey practitioner is to appreciate and understand the causes of generating the representation and measurement error, relative importance, effect of survey on survey result, and relative cost. Practice such an art implies more error modeling combined with a deep understanding of the source of error. Mixed mode, I deeply believe that mixed mode can be part of the framework as it can help sample coverage and mitigating measurement error. Of course, appropriate weighting schemes are needed to piece together the sample puzzle. Thank you.
Thanks, Oliviero. Now we will go to our next and last presenter, Trevor Thompson. He is Senior Vice President for Public Affairs and Media Research at NORC at the University of Chicago. He is a specialist in public opinion and elections research and has conducted surveys in dozens of countries around the world. He is the founding director of the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research, and is the former global director of polling at Associated Press. So he led the team that developed AP's VoteCast, AP and NORC's innovative election survey product. So now I leave Trevor present his paper about using mixed mode approach. Go, Trevor.
All right. Thank you very much, Claire. I am sort of coming third, so apologize if a little bit of what I'm going to say repeats what my colleague says, but we'll say it again with emphasis. But I want to talk a little bit just generally about the importance of using mixed mode approaches in research today, and then talk specifically about a large project that we have done at NORC in the US elections that uses multiple nodes and multiple sample frames as well. So we can talk a little bit about our practical experience implementing a large project like that. Not advancing my slides here. Just 1 second. I thought we had figured this out earlier, but I'm going to stop sharing and try this again here. Here we go. Apologize for that. So the mixed mode approach is, I think, essential for modern data collection efforts. Frankly, the most important thing and most practical reason to do multi-mode approaches today is really that we just can't ignore the cost benefits of doing self-administered questionnaires, especially self-administered surveys online. So that cost effectiveness is just really impossible to avoid. But there are also, disadvantages to each mode of data collection, and being able to use multiple modes to their own unique effectiveness really helps us improve both cost effectiveness, but also sample representation as well. So we know that just relying on web surveys can mean that we miss representation of certain populations that either don't have internet access or don't have or don't particularly feel comfortable doing surveys online. We'll also show that there can be some sort of substantive difference in samples collected by mode in elections that are important. So, then again, there are downsides to using multiple mode approach. The principal one is complexity. At NORC, we're very fortunate to have invested in a large data collection technology infrastructure to enable us to do multi-mode studies with a really sophisticated case management system that allows us to field the same sample across multiple modes. We can start interviews in one mode and complete them in another. We can field a survey to one sample in one mode, and then, for example, use telephone follow-ups with non-respondents if they don't respond in those other modes. So that is a very complex technological kind of infrastructure. Not all organizations are able to implement that, but even smaller projects, it becomes a big operational kind of effort to try to manage multiple modes. It can also lead to mode effects, and we do need to try to keep in mind the potential mode effects when designing a multi-mode kind of survey. So we'll go into some of the experiences that we've had with our VoteCast survey in particular, but respondents are unpredictable and tend to do strange things. And because of that, the more complexity you have with your data collection, the more messy your data can kind of be, that you need to sort of expect and plan for that as well. Indeed, you do need to account for and plan for the mixed mode design at every step of the survey lifecycle, and do it from the beginning, and not just try to clean it up at the end. You need to, when you're developing questionnaires, realize that questionnaires are presented differently in different modes, and you may need to change question wording or design for each mode to take into account for that. And then you need to sort of plan ahead for your data processing, data collection systems, and also think about whether there are any potential effects of weighting that you would need to correct at the end. So I'll just dive in directly to our VoteCast project, which is a large election survey that we developed in partnership with the Associated Press. It's meant to be a modern alternative to an exit poll. We were approached by AP after the 2016 US elections to help them design a replacement for the exit poll, which had just really become increasingly problematic and have more and more issues with accuracy, just as more and more of the voting in the United States transitioned to vote by mail, early vote in person, ways that people were voting other than in polling places on election day. So we worked with AP, we worked with other organizations, including Fox News as well, to create this alternative. And we first used it in the 2018 midterm elections, and we fully implemented it in the 2020 election cycle. It was, again, our partner was AP for this work. Fox News was a principal sort of subscriber to the product. We also had many other news organizations, including the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Univision, National Public Radio. Dozens of other news organizations used VoteCast as their primary analysis tool to report on the election results. VoteCast uses a multi-mode approach. It also uses a multiple sample frame kind of approach. But in terms of mode, we designed the survey really to take into account that more than half the voters were not voting in person on election day. They were voting in some other way. And so we wanted to reach them in their homes for the most part, and not in person in a sort of exit poll method, which was the traditional kind of way to collect this data on in US elections. We start with a core sample, a probability-based sample drawn from registered voters lists. We send a postcard via mail and ask people to participate in the survey online. And that's the way that most of the data is collected. But we know that there are some people who are just uncomfortable completing surveys online. So we give them an inbound toll-free phone number to call and complete the survey. We also do outbound phone calls to a subsample of the voter list sample. Especially, we target people that we know from experience are less likely to complete the survey online, but we also do some just follow-up of the broad sample of people who did not respond to the postcard. And then we supplement that with a large supplement of samples drawn from both opt-in and NORC's own probability-based online panel. So overall, we completed in 2020 over 130,000 interviews in all 50 US states. Was about a 10-day kind of field period. So it's a lot of data, a lot of case management, a lot of collecting data across modes, and all that data had to be cleaned and processed more or less in real time and reported out on election day. So just some looks at real data from our survey to show you some of the differences that we saw in the election data by mode. So these are drawn from the core sample, the probability-based sample drawn from voter lists. So you can see the web sample is more democratic. It's slightly more liberal. The phone sample is more Republican, more conservative. We also saw differences, therefore, not surprisingly, given that in who people said they were voting for, and also when people said they were going to vote or if they had voted already. And both those things in the 2020 election were highly correlated with the vote. And we also saw other sort of attitudinal kind of differences by mode in the US elections as well, whether it's satisfaction with government or what people thought the role of government should be. And again, this is very consistent with the other sort of partisan kind of differences as well. So certainly it validates the importance of investing in those additional efforts. If we had just fielded an online survey or had just offered our postcards and not done the phone follow-up, we would have had a much more significant overstatement of the Democratic vote than if we'd invested, than we saw by investing in that additional mode. So certainly there were cost challenges to that, and it would have been much less expensive to just go with the online mode, but it was important to make that significant additional investment in the phone mode as well to capture those additional cases. Just a few other quick practical kind of learnings from implementing a large survey like this in an election. This was a very complicated kind of survey, and ultimately, because of all the different modes, it became multiple questionnaires, very long questionnaires. So each of our survey databases for each mode had more than 400 questions in them, in addition to all the paradata that we captured. So it really became a very significant questionnaire programming kind of challenge. And one of the things that we learned, that it was important for the same programmer to program all the modes so that they totally understood what was going on with the different modes, and not have one programmer work on one mode and another one work on the other and then try to blend their work. So just from a practical tip, we suggest sort of maybe if you're going to divide up your resources, you may want to just sort of break up the project into smaller pieces, but have the same teams work across modes to make sure that everyone understands how the modes work together in a particular part of the project. Here's just a little bit of an example of, from a practical point of view, how a web-based question needs to be sort of translated into a phone-based kind of question. You can see there's just a few subtle differences that need to be made to the question wording to make things work in a web mode versus a phone mode. And these are things that you really need to plan ahead for and test as much as possible. The other thing that we have learned, not just in this study, but we have lots of experience doing this kind of work at NORC, is that respondents are very unpredictable and do strange things. And because of that, it makes for messy data that we need to control for. So we really have tried to implement our surveys at NORC to make it as easy as possible for respondents to respond to surveys in the mode that they choose. So if somebody breaks off on a web survey, we will try to complete the survey with them on the phone, which creates data complexity as well. But we also have cases where respondents are just uncomfortable and suspicious of the legitimacy of a survey. For example, they get our postcard in the mail, or they get a web invite. So they call us and they try to just verify that the survey is legitimate. And we start an interview over the phone, but then they say, oh, well, I was just trying to check to see if this is okay, but I'd rather fill this questionnaire out online. So I'll go back and do that. And we have many cases like that. So that creates a lot of messy data that we then need to sort of deal with. There are different ways to deal with that and different strategies that may work better for particular projects, but we found it's critical to basically do ongoing reviews of the data and clean up any issues so that there aren't any problems that need to be resolved in the end. And sometimes for smaller projects or projects where there's just too many things to work out, we may just decide not to allow people to switch modes, and you just would then, in many cases, have to give up completes in in those cases as a trade-off for sort of less messy data. So the last thing I'll say, I was asked to address the weighting considerations, and for us, for the most part, the surveys that we do at NORC, we sort of look at sampling and weighting separately from mode. So we sort of mostly draw our samples and then try to pursue the same sample with multiple modes. In the case of VoteCast, there was a lot of complex weighting that we needed to do because of the different sample frames. And that added most of the complication for weighting, not so much the modes. But there were certain issues that we did have to deal with weighting by mode, in particular because of our strategy of following up with non-respondents by phone. So people who didn't respond to the web survey or to our postcards, we targeted with phone calls, and we didn't necessarily do that evenly. So we need to make some adjustments because of that. So just to wrap up, just echoing what my colleague says, I think in today's environment, it's really critical to pursue multi-mode strategies. That the idea that you can just do surveys in one mode is disappearing rapidly, if not completely gone already. It's really important to plan ahead and think about all the issues with multi-mode data processing before the data collection begins. And data review throughout the project is really critical to deal with a lot of the messy kind of data that you get from this kind of imperfect kind of solution. So I will end there. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Trevor. Now I will ask Oliviero and Tobias to open their camera and microphone. I have lots of very interesting questions here from the chat. I will start with the questions that are addressed to everybody. Specifically starting from Nick Nanas, I give priority to Canadians all the time, for the reporting of mixed mode surveys. What has been the practice of reporting combined results by mode and also specific results by mode in order to be transparent on differences between modes? So the question here is really, particularly for election survey, do you publicize or make available results by mode so that people can see that there are differences? And for Tobias, also for EVS, I guess. Okay. Can we? Okay, we're gonna start with Oliviero.
Generally speaking, so of course, anytime that we use mixed mode for a published poll, it is of course declared. Now, the fact of separating the results by mode, it's a different story, because especially if you combine the way you combine, especially if you do combine by targeting some sample cells, for example, the young people coming from online more than from telephone, let's say, of course you cannot publish these separate cells because they make no sense. So I would say always it's extremely important to say that it's mixed mode when it is the case. And of course, if sometimes we do have a parallel mode with the same survey done online and telephone, for example. In that case, we can publish the two. But in general, for general public, we tend to give only one because it's complex enough not to complicate the task of communication.
Tobias.
Yeah, so I think I can offer a different perspective on that, because for EVS at least, our task was, our goal was to collect the data and make it available to the scientific community for reuse, right? So we were not out there to calculate some output statistic that we provide them, but we provide a data set. So, and in this data set, we offered all the modes together, right? So we had a data set for the face-to-face and a separate data set for the mixed mode. But in the mixed mode data set, we also had the mail and web mode together, because basically this is why you do a mixed mode survey, right? You want to put them together. If you would do them separately, it wouldn't be a mixed mode somehow. So the important thing is, I guess, is to provide identifier variables in a data set like that, so that every data user is able to clearly run analysis just using mail data, just using web data, or whatever modes you combine in your data set, and be able to see if there's some mode effects going on, and control for them maybe in an analysis. So I think it's about providing this information to data users.
True.
So I think we sort of do it both ways, I think, in our work. For VoteCast, for example, for simplicity to present in the media, obviously we just come up with one estimate of all the combined kind of samples, but we also really believe in transparency. So we make our data sets available, and we do disclose, the differences by mode, and we do technical reports. And I'm talking to you here, showing you some of the data and stuff. So we're very proud of the transparency of the work that we do there.
I will follow up a bit on this, because, for example, Trevor, part of your sample is non-probability. And people from this non-probability sample can go switch to telephone. So how do you put the same for Ipsos? I know the surveys in Quebec have 1 quarter that is telephone and probabilistic, and then they have 3 other quarters that come from different sampling sources, but all web. So how do you, and I see, Tobias, it can go from mail to web, and from the same as, so how do you combine this? Can you say, okay, I have the weighting, and this is the next question from people, the weighting is based on the source of data, or it's based on the mode, final mode that people use? I would think it's based on the source of data in a way.
For our work, the weighting is very complicated. I'll say, just to clarify, on the VoteCast product, we fortunately, because it would be very even more complicated, we limit our multi-mode phone and online approach to the probability sample, and the non-probability sample we only administer on the web. But that point aside, the weighting is complicated. It takes into account, all of the sampling probabilities on the probability side, with the demographic weighting that we do, and calibration and modeling to blend all those samples together. So it's complicated, but it really doesn't rely that much on the mode. It's mostly demographics and sampling probabilities. Very little of it's on mode, except, like I said, when we have made sort of almost sort of sampling kind of decisions to strategically use the modes to increase the representation of the sample by increasing the probability that some people are interviewed based on their profile, including the mode of survey that they're likely to respond to. In that case, we need to fix that with weighting.
Oliviero, you want to add on this?
Yes. Again, it depends on the design. The weighting depends on the design. After all, we have a post-stratification, and we have a post-stratification. So it depends on the stratification you have done. You could have 2 totally different cases. One is that you run exactly the same project separately online and cut it, let's say. And in that case, you use this to compare the measurement error, and what I was mentioning, the fact that profiles, even for sample cells, can be slightly different online or on CATI. So in that case, you can combine based on the experience you have of overestimating or underestimating specific parties or candidates. So in that case, you can just mix, so weighting, in my opinion, is more important to control some interactions between variables. For example, we do know that, for example, some kind of profiles you have online are less, when you cross two variables, you can have profiles that have to be adjusted because are less realistic, let's say. For example, online can be less realistic than CATI. In that case, you apply to the joint distribution what you find in CATI to the online. So this is why it's a way to use the structure of the most reliable, on the most trusted, let's say, data collection mode to apply to the less trusted one. That can be a way of using weighting.
Okay. I will just follow up a bit on this, and then I will come back to Tobias. Because I was surprised to see that in what Oliviero said, that you should not apply weighting to education, income, and past vote recall. Past vote recall weighting is a practice very, very, very common in Europe in general, not in Canada though, and it is likely voter models are also very common in the US. And in the US, the committee on the 2016 election recommended that there is always weighting according to education. Yes. So Trevor, do you wait for education? And you know, what is, I want to have you both speak on that.
Yes, we definitely do weight by education. I think that's critical now in US elections, and it was an advantage of our approach over the exit poll that, you know, the traditional way of weighting exit polls for non-response is to have the interviewers code the non-responding respondents by either estimated age, race, and sex, but it's difficult to guess about people's education. So that was something that they had to try to simulate. The advantage of our sampling design is that we can have really good benchmarks and use really well-developed techniques to make adjustments for variables like education. But yeah, I think you do have to weight by education now in the US.
And Oliviero, I've seen that in the 2017 election, presidential election in France, I guess most, except for you, I guess, the practice generally in France is always to adjust for voter recall.
Yes, we
do.
Generally, we do.
You do also. Okay.
Absolutely. In Europe, if you don't do it, you find another country. To be honest, there is a big difference when you don't use past vote recall. Nevertheless, it depends on the country. In the UK, for example, you don't need it really because you have little measurement error on past vote recall. In some other countries, you do. For example, even for education, just education, I think that is so let's now just finish on past vote recall. I think that it's important not to weight the people that don't give an answer, don't put strong assumptions on non-respondent. So it means that the non-respondent should always be left at the normal weight. So don't weight the non-respondent first, and trim the weights. Don't let the weights go up to 4, 5, 6 or more. For education, it's a different story. Education is clearly overstated. In some countries, not everywhere, but in some countries, education is overstated. For example, in the Latin country, education is really overstated. So I think that you should factor in the measurement bias when using official statistics. Let's say, if you have the people declaring a university level, graduate level at 40%, don't reduce them to the real, let's say 15, because part of this 40 you find is just over declaration. So with your experience, I would say you can use in weighting, but not using directly the official statistics, but taking something in between, let's say, which factors in the bias, the measurement bias. This is what I tend to do. And this is why I was mentioning art and science, because that is not a perfect, easy science. It's not just an easy formula to apply, unfortunately. That would be great.
I have questions coming on that, but I want to come back a bit on to Tobias. I was interested in the mode switching possibility in the VoteCast survey. Since when people can do it, they tend to use the mail survey. Did you think about allowing something like a button where you can download a paper questionnaire, for example, if the person wants to, or request a paper questionnaire? So if the person start the web survey and finally see it's too long, whether this possibility could be interesting on the same on the same topic. 1 hour questionnaire on the web is very long. I guess you have a slide that shows, but did you think about having something like we have in Word, you know, on the side saying, okay, you are in this and this section, so that it's easier for people to see where they are? So those are the two questions on switching mail and web.
You said VoteCast, but I guess the question goes to me, right?
Yeah, I said,
okay.
Like VoteCast did, you know, vote switching. So I come back to you about mode switching. Yeah.
So the first question, we did not offer a way to download the questionnaire if you were in the web mode. So there was no chance in doing that. But in the end, in each group, a respondent received a mailed questionnaire at some time, right? So even our push to web group in a sequential mode, they received, if they wanted to do it, paper-based questionnaire with the third contact. So they were able to do that. I think that we found was that a couple of people, they participated online and also used the paper-based questionnaire and send it to us. So you have to come up with routines to deal with situations like that. So which one do you use? Which one is where are the true answers, right? So this is if you offer multiple modes and you offer them simultaneously, you have to come up with solutions for multiple answering somehow, or just assume that a respondent first participates on the web and just completes 80% of the questionnaire and then sends you later, 2 weeks later, a paper-based questionnaire. So which one do you use? So these are issues, and I think Trevor referred to that as messy data, and that's what you have to deal with, and that's kind of interesting, actually. Okay, the second question was?
Whether you thought about having like sections seen on the left-hand side of the web questionnaire so that it's easier for people because it's such a long survey.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I'm not quite sure. We had a discussion on that. If you should provide like a scale, how much % you have completed right now, but I'm not quite sure. I think we agreed against it. I would have to check that again, but I think we did not provide a measure like that because the questionnaire is really long and you answer like 5 minutes of questions and it would give you like, there's way to go. I think this would be a reason to not do that. And we also very quite intrigued how the 60-minute questionnaire would work on the web and also the printed version of it, like there's a big stack of paper right there. So we first ran the 40-minute version of it, and then we said, well, it worked out, and we were eager to test whether the 60-minute version would also work, and we tested it, and it worked quite well. And other countries did that too, so we were actually seeing that it worked in other countries, and we were confident to do it also. And yeah, so we just saw a rather small difference between the response rates of the full version and the 40-minute version. So that was really interesting for us. But it's just a one-shot survey, right? It's just a cross-sectional survey. For a panel, it would be kind of different, right? So you wouldn't push your panel respondents into a 60-minute survey, and you want them to participate again and again and again. So you would try to give them a good feel in a short questionnaire, maybe.
And do they use this 1 hour or 40 minutes according to your do you have statistics that it takes them 40 minutes or 1 hour? Yeah,
it's the it's the average response time I used for that. So it's like 55 minutes maybe, around about that.
Okay, now I have here a number of questions. Some people are very interested about merging the data. So the fact that you merge a non-probabilistic, not even sampling frame, but source, let's say, and a probabilistic one. In the end, do you there are two possibilities. One is you weight the telephone survey, for example, to the population, and then you weight the web survey to the population, then you put the two together. Another possibility is, as Oliviero, I think, said, that you since you will use some from one to fill in the other, that you weight everything together. So what is the practice and advantage and disadvantage, and whether if you weight separately, you put them together, you do another run of weighting to see that everything is okay? So perhaps I'll start, Oliviero, go, yes. And then Trevor. Yeah.
Thank you. The reason why I make these two draws is not to say that you have to do necessarily to mix the cells. But it says that when you want to increase in a parallel use of mixed mode, not in the sequential one, we in general in election polling we just cannot afford sequential because it goes too fast. I mean, you don't, as we cannot use, usually we cannot use the pure random just because it goes too fast. So because when you have to, because if you publish a survey, a poll with results from the last 2 weeks, just does not work in an election campaign. So, but what I'm saying is that if you want to control the measurement error, you have some evidence of the differences between one mode and the other. In that case, as you mentioned, Claire, you have to weight each mode separately and then to merge, okay? If, on the opposite, you want to increase the coverage, in that case, you have to weight the entire mixed sample because these are separate cells. So you have to mix the sample, you have to weight the sample as if that was one single mode. It depends, and this is why I was saying the weighting depends on the design. If in your design you want mostly control the measurement error, please weight separately and then mix in the appropriate proportion. If it is to increase the coverage, you are forced to mix to weight as a unique sample.
Trevor, on the same question.
So for VoteCast, we do first start and weight the probability and non-probability samples separately, and then merge them and do additional rounds of weighting as well. We do some calibration using some dynamically modeled benchmarks that we create for some political variables. We also have applied a lot of small area estimation techniques to this sort of blending step where we're really trying to do calibration at not just statewide levels, but down to sort of sub-state, regional, and county level kind of variables as well to really try to improve the overall estimates in each state, because we've learned that those sub-geographic kind of levels are really critical to get right. So.
Now I have something from Uruguay, and the question is, quotas or no quotas? So you remember this discussion started in 1925, as a matter of fact. Quotas or no quotas? I see that most web survey opt-in panel use quotas. And in many countries in Europe, they use quotas also in telephone polls. So quotas or no quotas? Tobias, is it relevant for you or it's always random?
No, it's not always random, but for the EVS at least, it was probability-based register samples, so no quota there. If I would run a non-probability based sample from, say, an online access panel provider, I would use quotas, but not to make it representative, but just to control that there's enough variation on the quota variables.
Okay, Oliviero?
In general, we are using quotas nearly everywhere, to be honest, because both in telephone and web survey, you have to. I mean, the random is a fake one. So it's, of course, you are still within a cell, you are still selecting randomly within a cell. But the way you define the cell, I mean, is a quota, after all, it's a multiple stratification. As Claude Deville was saying, that is somebody from the National Statistics Institute here in France, we should look at the quota as a multiple stratification. So in a way, do not using quota is difficult. Now I've seen from Uruguay, they were asking also if you should wait on the variables where you have put quota. You can, but it's just to make the sample beautiful, because in general, you don't need. The weighting, the post stratification is more interesting for the variable, is more useful for the variable you haven't controlled at quota level, so before, during the field. And for example, the past vote recall, but again, on past vote recall, it depends so much on the countries. There are countries where it's really needed, in particular the Latin countries in Europe, really needed. In the UK, you don't need that. And I know that also in the US and Canada, to be honest, in general, is not used, the past vote recall.
And even in I know that in Canada, some pollsters tried to see if they could improve their estimate by past vote recall in some very bad polling messes, and it was even worse. So it's yeah. Trevor, on the same topic.
No, we're not using any kind of demographic quotas or anything like that on our samples.
So you sample according to some socio-demographic variables, and then within this you just go try to have the same response rate for every cell in a way. Yeah. Okay. There is a question here. Do you think that post-stratification weights based are enough to correct for non-probability sample? Because these samples may differ on attitudes, but not on socio-demographics. And this was particularly for you, Trevor, so you, and I will ask others to reply after.
Yeah, it's clearly not enough to just use sort of basic post-stratification weights to correct, frankly, not just the non-probability samples, but the probability samples as well. We're doing a lot of calibration techniques and additional things to try to improve the accuracy of the estimates, including, like I mentioned, some dynamically created benchmarks for things like partisanship and some political attitudinal variables as well to improve the estimates.
So we are, Oliviero, do you want to add on this?
Of course, we never wait the exit polls. So indeed, we are in a case which is much closer to the random, to the probabilistic sampling than in pre-election polls, where we are quite far. So we are in a context, in a framework which is closer to model assisted sampling than to pure random sampling, to be honest.
Okay. Tobias, do you want to add something, as you will be the last one to speak?
Regarding the last question, I fully agree with Trevor. So I think there is more going on, and just using calibration will not fix that problem. We need more information. We need more data, like paradata, for example, auxiliary data, geospatial data.
Okay, so look, we are getting at the end of this. I will thank everybody and inform you that the video playback of this webinar will be available on our website as of May 27. And you will also find recordings and slides for all the previous webinars at the same place. You will have slides also for this webinar. So I'd like to thank everybody and see you at the next webinar. It should be in September.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot to all the presenter for this very interesting and informative presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good day.